The market was alive with colors, voices, and strange smells. Alien traders shouted in unknown tongues, selling glowing fruits, floating trinkets, and mechanical pets that barked in metallic tones. John moved carefully through the crowd, keeping his head down. He was a human on a foreign planet, and humans here were rare. Every step he took reminded him that he did not belong. He told himself he was only passing through. He needed food, fuel, and maybe a safe place to sleep. That was all. He wanted no trouble. But trouble often found him, no matter how hard he tried to avoid it. As he passed a stall selling crystal knives, he felt a tug on his sleeve. He thought it was a thief trying to cut his pocket, but when he looked down, his heart froze. It was a little girl. Her skin shimmered faintly, like pale silver under the twin suns. Her eyes were too large for her small face, glowing softly with blue light, like stars reflected in water. Her hair, thin and almost white, fell around her shoulders in messy strands. She looked no older than 6. She stared up at him with those glowing eyes and whispered, "Will you be my father?" For a long moment, John could not move. The words struck him harder than any weapon. He was a soldier once, a man who had faced war, fire, and loss, but nothing had ever disarmed him like this. Around them, the crowd slowed. Alien voices hushed, traders stopped shouting, and some even turned to look. Whispers ran like ripples across the marketplace. Humans were outsiders, and for an alien child to speak such words to one, it was unheard of. John's throat felt dry. What did you say?" he asked softly, bending down so only she could hear. The girl's tiny hands trembled as she clutched his sleeve tighter. "Please, be my father." John's heart twisted. He wanted to ask 100 questions. Where were her parents? Why was she here alone? Why had she chosen him of all people? But her eyes stopped him. They were filled with a desperate hope mixed with fear. He looked around quickly. Some aliens in the crowd stared at him with suspicion, others with pity, and then he noticed something else. 2 tall figures in dark cloaks stood at the far end of the street. Their faces were hidden, but they were scanning the market slowly, their heads turning with predatory patience. John's instincts, sharpened from years of war, screamed danger. The girl followed his gaze and gasped. She pressed herself against his leg, shaking. "Don't let them take me," she whispered. John felt his pulse race. He had no idea who they were, but he knew enough. If the child was afraid of them, they were trouble. He glanced at the girl again. Her eyes locked on his, pleading silently, begging him for protection. In that moment, John had a choice. He could pull his sleeve free, walk away, and let the crowd swallow her. He could tell himself she wasn't his responsibility. He didn't belong here. He didn't even know her name. Or he could stay. The girl's trembling hand held his like it was the last rope keeping her from falling into darkness. And for reasons he could not explain, John could not let go. He crouched lower, his voice steady. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she whispered. "All right, Lyra," John said. His chest felt heavy as if some invisible weight had settled there. "Stay close to me." Her eyes widened in relief, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of a smile. The cloaked figures moved now, slowly pushing through the crowd. Their steps too smooth, too calculated. John knew he didn't have much time. He pulled his hood lower over his face and lifted the girl into his arms. She was light, far too light, like she had not eaten properly in days. The marketplace noise returned, but it was different now. Whispers grew louder, merchants stared openly, and the air thickened with tension. John began walking, not too fast, but with purpose. He could feel the eyes of the hunters on his back. He could almost hear their footsteps following. The girl clung to him, her head buried against his chest. "You won't leave me, right?" she asked, her voice trembling. John didn't answer right away. His life had been a chain of leaving and losing. He had lost comrades in battle, family back on Earth, even pieces of himself. Promises were dangerous. Promises could break hearts. But when he looked down at Lyra's little face pressed against him with such fragile trust, he heard himself say the words before he could stop them. "No," he whispered. "I won't leave you." The promise echoed in his chest like a vow carved in stone. Behind him, the cloaked hunters pushed harder through the crowd. The chase had begun, and John realized that by staying by this child's side, his life was about to change forever. John moved quickly through the twisting alleys of the alien city. The marketplace was behind him now, but the echoes of the girl's words still rang in his ears. "Will you be my father?" Her name was Lyra, and she clung tightly to him as if letting go meant death. Every few steps John glanced back. The hunters in cloaks were still searching, pushing through the crowd with slow, dangerous confidence. They hadn't spotted him yet, but it was only a matter of time. He turned a corner and ducked into a shadowed passage between two tall stone buildings. The walls shimmered faintly with alien moss that glowed green in the dim light. It smelled damp like old water in forgotten places. John crouched and set Lyra down gently. She looked up at him with wide, glowing eyes, her small hands trembling. "Who are they?" John asked softly. "Why are they after you?" Lyra hugged her knees and lowered her head. For a moment she stayed silent, her shoulders shaking. John almost thought she wouldn't answer. Then in a voice so low he could barely hear, she said, "They killed my mother." John felt a chill run through him. He leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Her lips trembled. "My mother, she was from the old clan. People feared her. They said she carried blood that was special. They wanted it. They wanted me too. She tried to hide me, but they found us. She fought them. And she died." John swallowed hard. The weight in his chest grew heavier. He wasn't sure what he had expected, but it wasn't this. "You've been alone since then?" he asked gently. Lyra nodded, a tear rolling down her silver cheek. "I ran. I lived in the streets. I begged for food. Sometimes people gave me scraps. Sometimes they kicked me away. But I remembered what my mother said. She told me that one day someone would come, someone not from here, someone who would keep me safe." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "When I saw you, I thought, maybe it's you." John stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. A prophecy? Or just the desperate hope of a dying mother? Either way, this child believed it with all her heart. And now, by standing with her in the marketplace, he had already stepped into the story. But why him? Why a broken soldier wandering the stars with no home of his own? He shook his head and muttered, "You picked the wrong man, kid." But Lyra looked up quickly, her eyes shining through her tears. "No, I picked right." The conviction in her voice struck him. It wasn't begging anymore, it was certainty. Before John could reply, he heard footsteps, heavy, slow, echoing down the alley. His instinct screamed again. The hunters. He grabbed Lyra's hand. "We have to move." They slipped out of the alley and into another street, this one quieter, lined with crumbling buildings and abandoned shops. The crowd was thinner here, but danger pressed closer. John guided her into an old doorway, its sign broken and unreadable. Inside, the air was stale and filled with dust. It looked like a forgotten workshop. Broken tools lay scattered, and faint symbols were carved into the walls. John set Lyra down and moved to the window, peeking through the cracks. The cloaked figures passed by slowly, scanning the street. One paused, its hood tilting slightly as if sniffing the air. John's heart pounded, but after a tense moment, they kept walking. He let out a breath and turned back. Lyra sat quietly on the floor, her knees tucked to her chest. She looked small, fragile, and far too young to carry such pain. John crouched in front of her. "Listen, Lyra, I don't know what those hunters want, but if what you say is true, they're not going to stop. If I stay with you, they'll come for me too." Lyra's voice shook. "So you'll leave me?" The words cut deep. John saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he'd seen in soldiers abandoned on battlefields. He remembered faces of comrades who looked to him for hope, only to be lost in the chaos of war. That memory burned. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "No, I said I wouldn't leave you. And I meant it." For the first time since he met her, Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. It was small, weak, but real. John sat down beside her, leaning against the wall. His muscles ached, but he ignored it. "Tell me more about your mother," he said softly. Lyra's voice steadied a little. "She was kind. She used to sing. She told me stories about the stars. She said our clan was once proud before the hunters came. She said our blood carried memory, that we were connected to something greater." John frowned. Blood that carried memory? It sounded like superstition. Or maybe something more. He had seen strange things in his travels. Perhaps her mother's words weren't just fantasy. Lyra looked down. "She said I must find someone who would stand with me. Someone who wouldn't fear my blood. Someone who would fight for me." Her eyes lifted, locking onto his. "I think she meant you." John felt trapped between disbelief and the weight of destiny. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but the truth was clear. He had already chosen when he lifted her into his arms in the marketplace. There was no turning back. Outside, faint footsteps echoed again. The hunters were not far. Time was running out. John stood, his jaw set. All right. If your mother wanted someone to stand with you, then that's what I'll do. But we can't stay here. We need to move, and we need to find a safe place. He reached down, offering his hand. Lyra took it without hesitation. Her small fingers tightened around his, and he felt a strange warmth, as if some invisible bond had already begun to form. As they slipped out of the ruined workshop and into the night streets, John knew two things. The hunters would never stop chasing them, and he could no longer walk away. For better or worse, the broken soldier had just become a father. The night had fallen over the alien city. The twin suns had dipped below the jagged horizon, leaving the streets bathed in the pale glow of lanterns and strange crystals fixed into the walls. The marketplace was far behind them, but John knew it was not enough. The hunters would not stop. He moved quickly through narrow alleys, Lyra's hand tight in his. Her small legs struggled to keep up, so at times he lifted her into his arms again. She was light, too light. Every time he carried her, he could feel her ribs under her clothes. Hunger and fear had hollowed her body, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, glowing faintly in the dark, trusting him with a faith that shook his heart. John, she whispered, her voice trembling. They're close. I can feel them. John stiffened. Feel them? How? Lyra pressed her small hand against her chest. Their presence. It makes the air heavy. My mother told me our kind could sense hunters. It's like shadows pressing on my heart. John tightened his jaw. Then we'll stay ahead of them. He turned a corner, but the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Heavy, unhurried, like predators who knew the prey had no escape. He cursed under his breath. Running blind through streets he didn't know was a bad plan. He needed to think. Ahead, the street split into two. One side led deeper into the city toward lights and noise. The other dropped into a darker passage, a slope leading downward toward the old ruins he had glimpsed earlier. Which way? John muttered. Lyra pointed toward the darkness without hesitation. Down, they won't follow so quickly. The ruins scare them. John didn't ask why. He trusted her instincts. He darted into the passage, his boots clattering against stone steps as they descended. The air grew colder, the walls damp. Strange vines hung from cracks, glowing faint green like the city itself was breathing in the shadows. For a moment it seemed quiet. But then a sound broke the silence, a low hiss. John spun. The hunters had followed. Two dark-cloaked figures appeared at the top of the steps. Their faces were still hidden, but one lifted an arm. A device glowed red in its hand, and suddenly a pulse of energy blasted down the passage, smashing against the wall beside John. Stone shattered. Dust filled the air. Run! John shouted. He grabbed Lyra and sprinted deeper into the ruins. Behind them, the hunters followed with slow, steady steps as if enjoying the chase. The corridor opened into a wide underground hall. Broken pillars stood like skeletons and carvings lined the walls, ancient alien symbols John couldn't read. In the center of the hall, a dried fountain sat, cracked and forgotten. John ducked behind a fallen pillar, setting Lyra down. His mind raced. He had no weapons, only his fists and an old combat knife hidden in his belt. Against hunters with energy weapons, it wasn't enough. Lyra looked at him, her small body shaking. They won't stop, John. They'll take me, and if you try to fight, they'll kill you. John crouched beside her, his voice low but firm. I've faced worse. I'm not letting them take you. Her eyes filled with tears. Why, you don't even know me. John hesitated. The truth was simple but heavy. Because no one should face monsters alone, not you. Not anyone. Before she could reply, the hunters entered the hall. Their cloaks shifted as they walked, revealing glimpses of pale, inhuman limbs, arms too long, fingers ending in sharp claws. Their hoods hid their faces, but their presence was suffocating. One of them raised its arm again. Hand over the child, a voice hissed, metallic and cold. And we will grant you mercy, human. John stepped out from behind the pillar, knife in hand. His voice was steady, though his heart thundered. You'll have to go through me. The hunters tilted their heads in eerie unison. Then they moved. The first one lunged, claws flashing. John dodged aside, rolling across the ground. He slashed with the knife, cutting across the creature's cloak. A spark of green blood spilled, and the hunter hissed in pain. The second hunter raised its weapon, firing a bolt of red energy. John ducked behind the fountain. The blast scorched stone, spraying fragments into the air. Lyra cried out, clutching her chest. The energy seemed to burn her from within, even though it hadn't touched her. "John!" she screamed. He grit his teeth. He had to end this fast. John picked up a broken chunk of stone and hurled it at the hunter with the weapon. The distraction gave him a second. He rushed forward, driving his knife into the creature's arm. The weapon clattered to the ground, sparking. The hunter roared, its hood falling back. John froze for half a second. Its face was skeletal, skin stretched tight over bone, eyes like burning coals. It looked both dead and alive, hunger carved into every line of its form. It lashed out, claws slicing across John's arm. Pain shot through him, but he held his ground, forcing the blade deeper. Behind him, Lyra's small voice rose in a desperate cry. "Stop, leave him!" The hunters froze. Their heads snapped toward her. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then one hissed, "The blood awakens." John didn't understand. But he knew one thing. They feared her. Using the moment, he shoved the hunter back and grabbed Lyra. He snatched the fallen weapon, holding it awkwardly in one hand. "We're leaving," he growled. With Lyra in his arms, he sprinted toward a narrow exit on the far side of the hall. The hunters hissed and followed, but slower this time, as if uncertain. They escaped into the night air. The ruins opened onto a cliffside overlooking the city. Wind whipped through the broken stones, carrying the distant sounds of life far below. John set Lyra down, his chest heaving. His arm burned from the claw wound, blood soaking his sleeve. But they were alive. For now. Lyra touched his hand, her small face pale but determined. "They fear me, John. That's why they want me. My blood, it carries power. And now, you're part of it too." John stared at her, heart still racing. He didn't know what that meant, but he knew one thing. The chase was far from over, and the next time, it would be even deadlier. The night wind stung John's face as he leaned against the cliffside rocks, his arm bleeding from the hunter's claws. His breaths came heavy, each one tasting of dust and iron. Beside him, Lyra crouched low, her glowing eyes fixed on him with fear and determination far beyond her years. "You're hurt," she whispered, her small hand reaching for his arm. John shook his head. "It's nothing. Just a scratch, but it wasn't nothing." The wound burned in a way that felt wrong, as if the claws had carried poison. Still, he forced himself to stand straight. He had no time to show weakness, not when hunters could appear again at any moment. He studied the girl. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight, her tears streaking lines down her cheeks. The hunter's words echoed in his mind. "The blood awakens. What did they mean?" John asked quietly. "What's in your blood, Lyra?" The girl hesitated, her small fingers twisting together. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she lifted her gaze, and in her eyes he saw both fear and pride. "My people, we are called the Kira," she began softly. "Long ago, before the hunters came, we were a great clan. We lived with the stars. Our blood holds memory, John. When one of us is born, we carry not only our life, but the voices and knowledge of our ancestors." John blinked. "You're saying, your blood remembers?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, when I close my eyes, sometimes I hear them. Whispers of old songs, faces I never met. My mother said it was a gift, but also a curse. Many wanted it. They wanted to use us, to drink our blood, to steal the memory inside. That is why the hunters came. They were made to destroy us." Her voice shook, but she pressed on. "Now I am the last of my clan. If they take me, the hunters will end everything my people were. But if I survive, maybe the Kira will not be forgotten." John felt the weight of her words settle on him like stone. He had fought wars for flags, for leaders, for broken promises. But this child was fighting to keep her people's very existence alive. He crouched down so his eyes met hers. "And your mother? She died protecting you because of this?" Tears welled again, but Lyra nodded. "She told me never to give in. She told me someone would come. Someone who would choose me not because of blood, but because of heart." Her small hand reached out, gripping his sleeve. "I think she meant you, John." For a moment, John didn't know what to say. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he was no savior. He was just a broken soldier, drifting between stars, running from his own past. He wasn't meant to carry something this heavy. But then he saw her trembling, fragile form. He remembered the desperate whisper in the marketplace. "Will you be my father?" And deep down, he knew he had already made the choice. He sighed, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then I guess your mother was smarter than me. Because I'm not going anywhere." Lyra's eyes filled with relief. a fragile smile breaking through her fear. Before John could say more, a faint sound reached his ears, distant, echoing. The hunters again. Their steps were slow, methodical, never rushed. They knew their prey couldn't run forever. John cursed under his breath. "We need to move." Lyra looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter in the dark. "There's a place, a sanctuary. My mother spoke of it. It's hidden in the ruins, guarded by the old ones. If we can reach it, maybe they'll help us." "Where?" John asked quickly. She pointed toward the jagged mountains beyond the city. Far, but not impossible. John studied the dark horizon. It was risky. The hunters would follow, and the mountains looked like a maze of death. But staying meant certain capture. "All right," he said firmly. "We'll head there. But first I need to deal with this wound." He tore a strip from his shirt and wrapped it tightly around his bleeding arm. The burning didn't fade, but at least it slowed the blood. Lyra watched silently, her small face tight with worry. When he finished, she whispered, "John, the hunters cut you. That poison will spread." He frowned. "You know about it?" She nodded slowly. "It's not like other poison. It tries to eat away at the soul, not just the body, but maybe I can help." Before he could stop her, she pricked her finger with a shard of broken stone. A drop of her shimmering blood welled up, glowing faintly. She reached for his arm. "Wait, what are you doing?" John asked, startled. "My blood carries memory," Lyra said softly. "It also carries strength. If you accept it, maybe it will fight the poison inside you." John hesitated. Everything in him resisted. He didn't want to drag her deeper into this, didn't want her to give away something so precious. But the burning in his arm grew worse with each breath, and her eyes pleaded with him, full of trust. Finally, he nodded. "All right, do it." She pressed her glowing blood gently into his wound. At once, a shock ran through him, cold and hot at the same time. His vision blurred. For a heartbeat, he saw images not his own. Stars burning, voices chanting, a world of silver skies. A flood of memory that wasn't his crashed through his mind. Then, as suddenly as it came, it faded. The burning in his arm eased. His breath steadied. He stared at her, stunned. "What was that?" Lyra lowered her hand, pale from the effort. "A gift. Now you carry a piece of us, too." John didn't know what to say, but deep in his chest he felt something new, like a bond had been forged between them, unbreakable. He reached down, lifting her into his arms once more. "Let's get to that sanctuary." The hunter's footsteps echoed closer, but John no longer felt like the same man who had stumbled into the marketplace. Something had changed in him, something powerful. And for the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was protecting. He was a father. The night stretched long as John carried Lyra through the broken outskirts of the alien city. The faint glow of her silver skin lit the darkness around them, like a small lantern guiding his steps. His arm, once burning with poison, now pulsed with strange warmth where her blood had touched him. He still couldn't explain what he had felt. Visions, voices, memories not his own. But the pain had faded, and in its place, a bond remained. Lyra rested against his chest, her breathing soft. She was exhausted. Her small hands curled tightly into his shirt as if afraid he might vanish if she let go. Every time John looked down at her, he felt something stir inside him, something he had buried long ago. He had promised never to let anyone depend on him again. War had taught him that promises broke, people died, and love only left scars. But this little girl, with her glowing eyes and fragile hope, was breaking down every wall he had built. Finally, when the ruins gave way to rocky hills, John stopped near a shallow cave. He set Lyra down gently. "We'll rest here for a while." "You need sleep." Lyra shook her head stubbornly. "No, if I sleep, they'll catch us." John crouched so his eyes met hers. "If you don't rest, you won't have the strength to keep running. Trust me, I'll keep watch." Her lip trembled. "But what if you leave while I sleep?" The words hit John like a knife. He saw the raw fear in her expression, the memory of abandonment carved deep into her. Slowly, he placed his uninjured hand on her shoulder. "I told you before, didn't I?" His voice was steady. "I'm not leaving you." For a long moment, Lyra searched his face as if trying to see if he was lying. Then with a small nod, she lay down on the ground beside him, curling into a ball. Within minutes, her breathing slowed and she was asleep. John sat in silence, the night wind whistling through the cave entrance. He tightened the bandage around his arm, staring out at the horizon. Somewhere out there, the hunters prowled, their glowing eyes searching, but for now there was peace. His gaze drifted back to Lyra. Even in sleep, her face looked tense as if nightmares chased her. He remembered his own childhood, the sound of his mother's lullabies, the warmth of family. It had been years since he thought of those things. He never imagined he would again. And yet here, with this alien child beside him, the memories returned. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "You're not alone anymore, kid." Hours passed. At dawn, Lyra stirred awake. She blinked up at him, her glowing eyes sleepy. "You stayed," she murmured, almost surprised. John chuckled softly. "Told you I would." She smiled, a tiny, fragile smile that filled the cold cave with warmth. For the first time, John realized how much he wanted to see that smile again. They ate little, dried rations John carried from his travels. Lyra nibbled carefully, like someone who had learned to survive on scraps. Watching her eat broke something inside him. A child shouldn't live like this. After their meal, John stood and stretched. "We should keep moving. You said your mother spoke of a sanctuary, right?" Lyra nodded eagerly. "Yes, the old ones live there. They guard the last of our clan's secrets. If we reach it, maybe they'll protect us." "Then that's where we'll go," John said firmly. The journey continued through the hills. The ground was rough, the air colder, but they pressed on together. Sometimes John carried her when the path grew steep. Other times, Lyra pointed out safer routes, her knowledge of the land surprising him. It was as if her ancestors whispered guidance to her. As they walked, their bond grew stronger. Lyra began asking questions about him, about Earth, about humans, about what fathers did. John answered in simple words. He told her about oceans that stretched beyond sight, about forests that smelled of rain, about fathers who carried their children on their shoulders. Her eyes lit up at every story and she clung closer to him. "Will you tell me more tonight?" she asked shyly. John smiled faintly. "Yeah, I'll tell you more." But beneath the warmth, danger still lingered. Twice, John spotted strange marks in the dirt, claw-like imprints that matched the hunters. Once, he even thought he saw a shadow on the ridge above them, watching before vanishing into the mist. The hunters were not far. That night, as they camped under the stars, Lyra sat close to John, leaning against his arm. The silence stretched comfortably between them until she spoke, her voice small. "John, do you think fathers are forever?" He looked down at her, unsure how to answer. "What do you mean?" "My mother said, a father is someone who never leaves. Even if the world ends, he stays." Her voice shook. "But I don't know if that's true. Everyone leaves." John felt his throat tighten. He thought of his own father, long gone, of comrades left behind, of people he had failed. But then he looked at her, this child who had chosen him when she had no one else. "Yes," he said at last, his voice rough. "Fathers are forever, at least I'll try to be." Lyra's eyes shimmered with tears, but she smiled. "Then maybe you are my father now." The words hit John harder than any weapon. He didn't answer right away. He only reached out and pulled her gently into his arms. She hugged him back, small arms wrapping around his chest. In that moment, he realized something terrifying and beautiful. This bond wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about love. And love meant he would fight until his last breath to protect her. Far away, hidden in the hills, the hunters howled in the night. The chase was not over. But now John was no longer just a man running. He was a father defending his daughter, and nothing in the universe was more dangerous than that. The hills grew sharper as John and Lyra climbed higher. The wind howled between jagged rocks, carrying with it a smell of ash and old storms. The sanctuary Lyra had spoken of lay somewhere beyond these mountains, but the hunters were closing in. John could feel it. Every step felt heavier, every shadow stretched too long. His soldier's instinct screamed that the chase was reaching its end. "John," Lyra whispered, clinging to his hand. "They're near. I feel them in my chest," he nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to face them." She froze, fear flickering in her glowing eyes. "Face them? But they'll kill you." "Maybe," John admitted, his jaw tightening. "But they'll never take you. Not while I'm breathing." Lyra's small fingers tightened around his hand. She wanted to argue, but her voice failed. Deep down, she understood. The path narrowed to a flat plateau overlooking the valley below. The twin moons cast pale light across the stone, painting everything silver. John knew at once it was the perfect place for an ambush. And then they appeared. Two shadows stepped from the darkness, cloaks billowing in the wind. The hunters' glowing eyes pierced the night, their claws gleaming faintly. They moved slowly, confidently, as if they already knew the outcome. One raised its voice, cold and metallic. "Human, this is your last chance. Give us the child and your death will be swift." John stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the hunters. His voice was steady. "She's not yours. She never will be." The second hunter hissed, lowering its hood. Its face was skeletal, stretched with hunger. "You bleed with her blood now. You carry what we seek. That makes you prey as well." John drew the stolen energy weapon from his belt, its grip strange in his human hands. "Then you'll have to kill me to get her." The hunters lunged. John fired, a bolt of red energy blasting the ground near their feet. The stone cracked, smoke rising. The hunters split, moving like shadows, faster than any human. One came at him from the left, claws slashing. John blocked with the weapon, sparks flying as metal met bone. The second circled toward Lyra. She cried out, stumbling back, but John's voice thundered. "Stay behind me!" Rage surged through him. He swung the weapon hard, striking the first hunter across its chest. The cloak tore, green blood sprang. It hissed, staggering but not falling. These things didn't die easily. The second leapt at him, claws raised high. John rolled across the ground, slamming his knife upward into its leg. The creature shrieked, but its strength was overwhelming. It slammed John into the stone, claws digging into his shoulder. Pain shot through him, white-hot, but he held on. He forced the weapon upward, firing point-blank into the hunter's chest. The blast hurled the creature backward, its body cracking the ground. It twitched once, then stilled. John staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his wounds. One down, one left. The surviving hunter roared, its voice echoing across the plateau. It charged with terrifying speed, knocking the weapon from John's hand. Claws slashed across his ribs, tearing fabric and skin. He fell to his knees, gasping, but still raised his knife. The hunter loomed over him, claws raised for the killing strike. And then Lyra screamed. Her voice carried like thunder, her eyes blazing with light. For a moment, the air itself seemed to tremble. The hunter froze, its claws inches from John's face. Its body shook violently, as if unseen chains bound it. John stared in shock as Lyra stepped forward, her small hands glowing. "Leave him," she cried, her voice ringing with something ancient, something not her own. "You will not take my father." The hunter shrieked, writhing as if burned. Its skeletal form cracked, green light spilling from its veins. It staggered back, howling into the night. John seized the moment. With the last of his strength, he lunged, driving his knife deep into the creature's chest. The hunter convulsed, its scream piercing the mountains. Then with a final shudder, it collapsed into dust. Silence fell. John dropped to one knee, his breath ragged. His body burned with pain, his vision blurred. But he was alive. And Lyra was safe. The little girl ran to him, tears streaming down her silver cheeks. She threw her arms around him. I thought they'd take you away," she sobbed. He held her close, his hand trembling as it rested on her back. "Not a chance," he whispered. "I told you I'll never leave you." For a long time they stayed like that, father and daughter bound not by blood alone, but by choice. Above them the moon shone brighter, as if bearing witness to their stand. John knew this was only the beginning. The hunters might return. More enemies would come. But something had changed tonight. Lyra had discovered her strength, and John had embraced his role. He was no longer just a soldier, no longer a drifter lost among the stars. He was a father, and for her, he would fight the whole universe. The silence after the battle was heavy, broken only by the sound of John's rough breathing and the soft sobs of the little girl in his arms. The dust of the fallen hunters drifted away on the night wind, glowing faintly before disappearing into nothing. John sat back against a broken rock, exhausted, his body aching from every wound. He had fought battles before, but this one felt different. He wasn't fighting for duty or command. He had fought for her, for Lyra. The child clung tightly to him, her small frame shaking but her eyes still glowing with a light that was no longer just fear. It was power. Something had awakened inside her when she cried out, something her enemies feared. John brushed a hand gently over her silver hair. "It's over," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was true. "They're gone." Lyra pulled back enough to look at him, her cheeks wet with tears. "You stayed. You didn't leave me. John felt a lump in his throat. I told you. Fathers don't leave. The words hung in the cold night air, heavier than any vow he had made in war, and for the first time in years he meant them. But their moment of peace did not last long. From the shadows of the cliffs other figures appeared. Not hunters, different. Cloaked, but their steps carried no malice. Their movements were slow, ancient, as if the earth itself guided them. Lyra gasped. The elders... John tensed, ready to fight again if needed. But the tallest of the cloaked beings lowered his hood, revealing a face carved with age, skin silver and cracked like stone. His eyes glowed faintly, the same light as Lyra's. You have brought her here, the elder said in a deep, echoing voice. The last child of the Kira. His gaze shifted to John. And you, the outsider who bleeds with her blood. John stood, holding Lyra close. If you've come to take her, you'll have to go through me, too. The elder raised a hand slowly. No, we do not seek to harm her. We have waited for this moment. For the one who would stand by her side. Lyra blinked. You knew? The elder nodded. Your mother sent word before she fell. She spoke of a protector who would come. Not Kira, not of our blood, but bound by choice. It seems her vision was true, John frowned. If you knew she was in danger, why didn't you help her? Sadness crossed the elder's ancient face. We were too few, too weak. The hunters would have destroyed us all. Only hidden, only in silence could we survive until now. John wanted to argue, but Lyra pressed her face against his chest. Her trust in him was all that mattered. The elder's gaze hardened. Now, outsider, you must choose. If you walk away, the hunters will come again. They will never stop. But if you remain, if you claim the child as your own, you will become bound to her blood and to our people. You will no longer belong to the world you came from. The words struck like thunder. John had always dreamed of returning to Earth someday, even if only in memory. To walk away meant leaving Lyra unprotected, doomed to be hunted until she was caught. To stay meant giving up the last pieces of his old life, his past, his home, everything he had once known. He looked down at the girl in his arms. Lyra's eyes were wide, her lips trembling. John, she whispered. I don't want to lose you. John knelt, brushing a tear from her cheek. He thought of his life, wandering, broken, empty. He thought of the moment she tugged his sleeve in the marketplace and whispered, Will you be my father? And he realized something. He had never been more alive than he was now, standing with her. He looked at the elders, his voice steady. I've already made my choice. I stay, she's my daughter now. No matter what it costs. The elder bowed his head slowly. So be it. From this day you are no longer only human. You are guardian of the Kira, her father in blood and spirit, and through her your memory will live among us forever. Lyra's face lit with a smile so pure it pierced John's tired heart. She threw her arms around him. Thank you, John. Thank you, Father. The word father echoed in him, not as a wound, but as healing. He hugged her tightly, knowing there was no turning back. The elders stepped closer, forming a circle around them. Their voices rose in a low chant, ancient and powerful. Symbols carved into the stones around the plateau began to glow, casting light across the mountains. John felt warmth spread through his chest, binding him and Lyra together. It was no longer just a promise, it was law, written into the stars themselves. For the first time in years, John did not feel like a man lost. He felt like he belonged. As the chanting ended, the elder spoke again. The hunters will come again, but they will find not a child alone, but a family. And no force in the universe is more dangerous than that. John stood taller, Lyra's hand held firmly in his. The night wind blew strong across the cliffs, carrying away the dust of battle. He had chosen. He was no longer a soldier running from the past. He was a father, standing for the future. And if the hunters came again, he would be ready.